So, everyone, some definitions have changed again recently. Just yesterday at the House Judiciary meetings with regard to Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court, she said the word sexual preference, which became, well, pretty huge controversy. Merriam-Webster, I think it was, changed their definition for this, for some reason, in order to make a sexual preference a offensive term. Man, this sort of thing, man, it's just going faster and faster. It just seems that they've given up the ghost, okay? They're done. They're no longer pretending to be objective. No one is. It's amazing. And, you know, people are like, a lot of the time they're saying things like, oh, look at all the things they're doing. This is all evidence that they're winning. We're all going to lose. You know, all those black pills, all those people who are screaming to the hilltops that there's no chance. Roman, follow the Republic. Roman decline, you know, that sort of thing. And I think it's actually evidence of the exact opposite. Because what these people don't seem to understand is that throughout the last century, what the left has absolutely succeeded in doing is changing the culture and the people subtly and by degrees. It's the entire idea of progressivism. For those who don't know, the idea of progressivism is that we're going to get there through steps. So, like, we're not going to get to our final time. We're not going to get to our final area. We're not going to get to our final positions until way later. We're going to compromise our way there. That's the idea of progressivism. That's why you have people, progressives of like the 1920s and 1930s who were just communists. And they were just lying about their positions. You know, you get a lot of that kind of thing. You still get it nowadays. But now they've given up the ghost. They've realized that, I think after 2016, people on the left, I think it started a bit before that, but particularly after 2016, after Donald Trump's election, you saw a lot of progressives, you saw a lot of people on the left just give up. They gave up being progressive. They gave up being liars about their positions. They gave up compromise. Instead, they have gone to, we need to get this all done now. And I think it shows, more than anything, that they are scared. That they're running scared, and that there's only one more push that needs to be done in order to actually defeat them. And I think the definitional arguments are, you know, to get back on topic, the definitional arguments are one of the key aspects of this, because they've really, really gone hard on definitions, particularly within the past few years. Things like gender, now with sexual preference, and other things like that. They've deigned to change definitions much, much more often than they used to in the past. And, you know, changing definitions has always been a fertile ground for the left. At least in my summation. The reason being that most people hate semantic arguments. As I talked about briefly yesterday, people, when they see a semantic argument, they will immediately recoil in horror at the idea of even speaking about the definitions of words and what they mean. And I think that's particularly conservatives. I don't know why. I feel like that's something that happens a lot more often on the right than on the left. I don't really understand it. Reason being that it's important. Language is important. Because when I say apple, I mean orange. Or when I say orange, I mean apple. And then we talk about the differences between apples and oranges. Well, if I'm using my definitions and you're using your normal definitions, well, we're never going to get anything done. Reason being that we aren't speaking the same language. We might as well not be speaking together at all if we aren't speaking with the same definitions of terms. And you get that a lot in politics. A lot more subtly, in fact, because you have different definitions for things like rights, or freedom, or liberalism, or any other term, like conservatism, what the right is, what the left is, what far right, you know, all of these terms are so obtuse and so ill-defined that you cannot have a proper political argument because no one's speaking the same language. And this is just another example of such. Once you redefine something to be something it isn't, then you can speak and not have the cognitive dissonance of being wrong, while portraying things that are wrong clearly to other people. I think one of the clear examples of this is the definition of gender. I mean, you have in supposedly respected dictionaries things like gender defined as gender identity, which is patently absurd because if anyone who understands how definitions work and has gone to language arts in 5th grade would understand that you cannot put the word in the definition of the word. Like, if I defined word as it is a word, that's not a definition. That's just me restating the word in a different way. It doesn't tell me anything about what's actually going on. And that's very common among leftist redefinitions of arguments, gender just being the most prominent of that. And at the same time, you have inconsistent definitions. So, like, things with the second definition of gender, which is essentially the gender roles that people have. Things like, oh, he wears a skirt, so that means he's a woman, that sort of thing. Which, depending on who you ask, they don't even believe. They'll say, oh, that's some sort of offensive thing to drag queens. I think a very telling thing about the whole gender ideologue debate is what you should always ask someone when they start arguing it with you and they're a gender ideologue. You should ask them what they think about drag queens, because honestly, it's the most inconsistent thing about their ideology, about their position, because they just can't answer that question, because either answer is wrong. It's either going to invalidate one or the other definition. Because if a drag queen's, if someone who's dressing as a woman is automatically a woman because they fit the woman gender roles, well then, what's the point of gender identity? And by proxy, if what's the point of the third definition? And as well, if they aren't a woman, what's the point of the second definition? Well, the second definition is just nonsensical at that point. It's like, well, obviously, that drag queen's not a woman; he's a man. So, and if you agree that he's not a woman, then gender roles have nothing to do with it. They've essentially redefined gender to be nothing. I mean, I don't even think that we should be using the term gender at all, because it's just a confused term. You should completely discard it from your vocabulary. It is completely worthless. And there are a lot of terms like that. There are a lot of terms which are completely worthless. I mean, at this point, racism kind of is. I mean, that to a lesser extent, because there is still a legitimate definition that exists for racism that is worthwhile to use in politics. But especially for something like gender, it's just a worthless term. You should replace every time you use the term gender, you should just use sex. I mean, and you should say, no, I'm using sex-based pronouns. I think that's a legitimate argument to be made. Something I want to. You know what? No, never mind. I think that's all. I'm out.